there were always divisions, and we always argued about policy. What strikes me that's different now, and not just now, but in recent years, is we argue over facts. We argue over the truth. Congresswoman Cheney, there is talk that January 6th was a false flag operation, that it was a case of liberals and the deep state setting up conservatives and Trump supporters. Is there any truth to that?
None at all. You know, it's the same kind of thing that you hear from people who say that 9/11 was an inside job, for example. It is, it's un-American to be spreading those kinds of lies, and they are lies. And we have an obligation that goes beyond partisanship and an obligation that we share, Democrats and Republicans together, to make sure that we understand every single piece of the facts about what happened that day, and to make sure the people who did it are held accountable. And to call it a false flag operation to spread those kinds of lies is really dangerous.
This is Republican lawmaker Liz Cheney responding to this desperate right-wing spin that January 6th was a false flag. A reference, of course, to Tucker Carlson's new series on Fox Nation, where he props up a baseless conspiracy theory that the whole thing was orchestrated by the government to lure in a bunch of innocent, unsuspecting Trump supporters to be able to then round them up and charge them. Because, of course, when it comes to Trump supporters storming the Capitol and trying to assassinate elected officials who won't bend to Trump's authoritarian will, they're the victims. Got it. Now, as far as this January 6th false flag conspiracy theory is concerned, there's one minor issue that everyone on the right seems to be conveniently missing. Trump wanted them there. Republicans are trying to claim that the deep state or that the evil Democrats set them up. How do you explain that the Republican leader himself literally tweeted on December 19th, "Big protest in DC on January 6th, be there, will be wild." And yet now suddenly we're pretending that we don't know how they ended up there, or that it was the left who orchestrated this? During the insurrection, Trump posted a video encouraging them, lamenting the election being quote-unquote stolen. All of this was welcomed by Trump because this whole thing happened on purpose and on his orders. Rolling Stone just released a story wherein they spoke with a number of people who are also being investigated by the January 6th committee, and those people admitted that they were involved in planning meetings with members of Trump's team, including former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, along with Republican members of Congress, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, Lauren Boebert, Mo Brooks, Madison Cawthorn, Andy Biggs, and Louis Gohmert. Gosar reportedly also dangled the possibility of a blanket pardon in an unrelated ongoing investigation to encourage the January 6th organizers to move forward. So if you're looking for the sneaky, devious officials who organized this thing, you might want to just take a look at exactly the people who you'd think would be responsible. Just because a crime is done in plain sight doesn't make it any less of a crime. And yet still, for the same reasons that these Republicans organized the Stop the Steal rally and the subsequent insurrection in the first place, all of it based on as flimsy a story as you can imagine, this false flag conspiracy follows that exact same script. I mean, think about it. If you are gullible enough to think that an election that was litigated and confirmed over 60 times in the courts, in the DHS, in the DOJ, in Republican Secretary of State's offices, in recounts and audits, and still believe that it was stolen, then you're probably a decent mark to be manipulated into thinking the next conspiracy theory that a bunch of Trump supporters storming the Capitol somehow wasn't the fault of those Trump supporters. The people who are being convinced otherwise aren't enlightened, they are fools. And by the way, it's not just Liz Cheney who's spoken out about this. Adam Kinzinger wrote, "Anyone working for Fox News must speak out. This is disgusting. It appears Fox News isn't even pretending anymore." And Tucker's fellow Fox personality Geraldo Rivera quote tweeted Kinzinger, writing, "False flags? Bullshit." But of course those voices won't do anything to move the needle because the defining feature of today's GOP is absolute loyalty to one man. But hey, definitely not a cult. And again, of course it's bullshit. Just like every single claim of election fraud that led to the insurrection in the first place was bullshit. But just like those people were manipulated then, they're being manipulated now. The right relies on its supporters being ignorant and angry and gullible. And they want them to stay that way until midterms, when they can prey on that anger both to turn those people out and to threaten more violence if they lose again. All of this, by the way, the disinformation campaigns, the lies, the propaganda, all of it, as opposed to simply proposing a platform that's actually popular. That's all they'd need to do. But because they have no policy platform that could win them any elections, because they stand for tax cuts for millionaires and pretending climate change is a hoax and stripping women of their reproductive rights, Well, instead, we're left with the bullshit that Tucker Carlson and Fox News are spewing right now, because they don't care what they have to destroy in their desperate pursuit of power. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.